Sigmund Freud's foundational contribution to modern psychology lies in his emphasis on the unconscious aspects of the human psyche. As a brilliant creative thinker, Freud provided compelling evidence through meticulously recorded case studies that most of our actions are driven by psychological forces beyond our conscious control. He compared the structure of the human mind to an iceberg, where the vast bulk lies beneath the surface, hidden from direct awareness. In The Anatomy of the Mental Personality, Freud explains conscious and unconscious mental activity, describing the unconscious as mental processes whose existence we must assume due to their observable effects, even though we are not directly aware of them. He further refined this concept by distinguishing between processes that can easily become conscious, which he termed the preconscious, and those that remain deeply buried and are resistant to conscious awareness, which he continued to call the unconscious. Freud's first major premise is that the majority of an individual's mental processes are unconscious. His second, more controversial premise, rejected by many psychologists, including his disciples Jung and Adler, is that all human behavior is ultimately motivated by sexuality. Freud identified the primary psychic force as libido or sexual energy. His third major premise asserts that due to powerful societal taboos surrounding certain sexual impulses, many of our desires and memories are repressed, meaning they are actively excluded from conscious awareness. Building upon these three foundational ideas, Freud developed a model of the psyche divided into three components: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is the reservoir of libido and the primary source of all psychic energy. It functions to fulfill the primordial life principle, which Freud identified as the pleasure principle. The id functions without consciousness or rational order, characterized by a psychotic and amorphous vitality. Freud metaphorically described the id as a cauldron of seething excitement, lacking organization or unified will, driven solely by the instinctual needs for gratification according to the pleasure principle. The id does not adhere to logical laws, and contradictory impulses can coexist without neutralizing each other. It recognizes no values, morality, or distinction between good and evil. The id is the source of all our desires and aggressions, functioning in a lawless, asocial, and amoral manner. If left unchecked, the id would drive individuals to destructive and self-destructive behaviors in pursuit of pleasure. Historically, this force within human nature was often attributed to supernatural forces like the devil, highlighting a psychological parallel in the characterization of the id. This connection is evident in observations of young children and neurotic adults who display uncontrolled impulses toward pleasure that can lead to excessive self-indulgence or self-harm. To counterbalance the id's destructive potential, other psychic agencies are necessary to protect both the individual and society. The ego serves as the rational governing agent of the psyche, regulating the instinctual drives of the id so they can be expressed in non-destructive ways. While much of the ego functions unconsciously, it also encompasses what we typically consider the conscious mind. Freud described the ego as representing reason and good sense, standing in contrast to the untamed passions of the id. Unlike the id, which is governed by the pleasure principle, the ego functions under the reality principle, mediating between internal desires and external realities. It acts as an intermediary between the individual and the outside world, ensuring that the id's demands are met in socially acceptable way. The superego, the other regulating agent, primarily functions to protect society. Largely unconscious, The superego serves as the moral censor, embodying conscience and pride. It represents internalized societal norms and the pulse toward perfection, advocating for the higher aspects of human life, such as moral values and ethical conduct. The superego represses or inhibits the id's drives, blocking impulses that society deems unacceptable, such as overt aggression, sexual passions, and the Oedipal instinct. Freud attributed the development of the superego to parental influence, where children internalize societal norms through the rewards and punishments meted out by their caregivers. An overactive superego can lead to an unconscious sense of guilt, often referred to as a guilt complex. Contrary to popular misconceptions, Freud did not advocate for the relaxation of all moral inhibitions and social restraints. Instead, he emphasized the importance of balancing the demands of the id, ego, and superego to maintain psychological health. The id would drive us toward hedonistic excess, the superego toward rigid conformity, and the ego must navigate between these extremes to foster a healthy, balanced individual. One of the most insightful applications of Freud's tripartite model of the psyche is found in literary criticism, such as Henry A. Murray's analysis of Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Using Freudian concepts, Murray interprets the white whale as a symbol of the strict conscience of New England Puritanism, a projection of Melville's own superego. Captain Ahab, driven by an uncontrollable obsession to avenge his injury, is the rapacious and destructive id. In contrast, Starbuck, the rational first mate, embodies the ego, striving to mediate between Ahab's irrational impulses and the external world's demands. While many scholars are skeptical of Freud's tripartite model, they often react more strongly against the application of his sexual theories to literature, particularly the symbolic interpretation of imagery in terms of sexuality. Freudian psychoanalytic criticism frequently interprets imagery using sexual symbolism, a tendency that has sparked considerable controversy. For example, concave images like ponds, flowers, cups, vases, caves, and hollows are seen as female or yonic symbols, while elongated objects such as towers, mountain peaks, snakes, knives, lances, and swords are interpreted as male or phallic symbols. Activities like dancing, riding, and flying are also viewed as symbolic of sexual pleasure. In the work The Life and Work of Edgar Allan Poe, a psychoanalytic interpretation, Mary Bonaparte interprets the figure of Psyche in Ulalume as an ambivalent mother figure, both longed for and a protective force against incestuous instincts. Her assertion that Psyche's drooping wings pose physical impotence exemplifies the controversial nature of Freudian symbolism. Though such interpretations have a basis in psychoanalytic theory, their relevance to literary criticism is often questioned. The tendency to apply sexual symbolism even to seemingly innocent narratives, like interpreting Little Red Riding Hood as an allegory of the conflict between male and female sexuality, highlights the contentious nature of Freudian analysis. Freud's theories on child psychology are equally controversial. Contrary to traditional beliefs, Freud argued infancy and childhood are periods of intense sexual experience. Broadly defined, he identified three phases of erotic development during the first 5 years of life, each associated with a specific erogenous zone: the oral, the anal, and the genital. These zones are linked not only to pleasure but also to the satisfaction of vital needs like eating, elimination, and reproduction. Frustration in gratifying these needs during childhood can lead to fixations that shape adult personality. For example, compulsive cleanliness may result from an anal fixation due to strict toilet training, while compulsive smoking may stem from an oral fixation linked to premature weaning. Even among normal adults, sublimated responses to these erogenous zones are common. According to Freud, around age 5, children reach the stage of genital primacy marked by the emergence of the Oedipal complex. This complex involves the boy's unconscious rivalry with his father for his mother's affection. Borrowing from Greek tragedy of Oedipus, he unknowingly kills his father and marries his mother. Freud described the complex as a blend of affectionate and hostile feelings toward the father. The boy identifies with his father but simultaneously harbors a desire to replace him in his mother's affections, leading to ambivalence and eventual repression of these desires. This ambivalence manifests in later life as a fear of castration and resistance to authority, which Freud linked to the unresolved Oedipal conflict. Freudian theory has been applied to literature to uncover deeper psychological meanings. For example, Nathaniel Hawthorne's My Kinsman has been interpreted as a symbolic rebellion against the father figure. The protagonist's laughter at the humiliation of his once respected relative reflects an unconscious joy in escaping parental authority, symbolizing the resolution of the Oedipal conflict and the transition to adult independence. Freud's theories, while controversial, have profoundly influenced psychology and literary criticism, offering tools to explore the complexities of human behavior and cultural expression.